Well, welcome to our MATC seminar series. It's my pleasure to introduce Dan Sabin, who's going to be talking today. He's the CEO and president of Iowa Northern Railway Company. He has a wealth of experience in running short lines and working for the Class 1 railways. For the football fans out there, he also runs the Hawkeye Express every Saturday when there's a home game in Iowa City. And I can't wait to actually take that train, Dan, so I'm looking forward to that. And he's going to be talking about the issues of operating and the engineering issues of running a railway and looking at the big picture. So Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll talk a little bit about the Iowa Northern and how we came to be. But what I'd like to do is, as many of you may not know a lot about railroading, it may be interesting to talk about the opportunities that we have in the industry, particularly the growing shortline industry. And so I've adapted this in a way where I kind of take a lot of the small pieces and put them into a big picture scenario, because at the end of the day we're a business, and we'll talk a little bit about that. This was originally a main line of the Rock Island. The Rock Island liquidated in the early 80s. And so the grain elevators on the line worked together with the trustee of the liquidated Rock Island and bought it on February 22nd in 1984. We now cover northeastern Iowa with about 185 miles. Sure. In the early years, when they took over the line, there hadn't been trains over the track for some time, and it was literally pastures for the farmers. They had knocked down all the fences, and there were actually 4-inch in diameter trees growing between the rails. So you can imagine what a challenge it was. This is a map of our line. We're kind of unique in the shoreline industry because many short lines are spin-offs of a Class 1 railway, and they only have one connection. The Iowa Northern is very fortunate that we have 3 connecting points with Union Pacific, 2 with Canadian National, 2 with Canadian Pacific, and then we connect also with the Iowa Interstate system through the Krandik in Cedar Rapids. We've been very aggressive in our economic development. I believe that we're one of the leaders in the state of Iowa on attracting new businesses. We've had a growth curve about 18% annually between 2003 and 2011, and that was despite a major flood damage that put us out of service for 18 months, or at least bifurcated our line, and coming through a fairly major recession. This kind of shows our relationship with the connecting railroads. We operate 24 hours, 7 days a week. Many of our interchanges are met twice. Most of the customers on our line are served twice a day, 7 days a week, which is literally unheard of in the railroad industry. But probably the most important thing that we're proud of is we run the company like a business and not like a railroad. And we really encourage our employees to look at what we need to be doing, take the side of the customer, and use their authority in the field to be empowered to make decisions right away. They'll never be criticized for making the wrong decision as long as it's always in favor of the customer. We take a very serious position with the state and the communities we serve. We spend a lot of time in the field with these people. We deal with crossings and a lot of issues, and we always want to have the community know us as a face, not just a big railroad from somewhere else. We also encourage our people to take some risk. We can't grow if there's not risk taking, and I encourage healthy risk, because we've got to be easy to do business with. We've got to be something that stands out, and then I repeat over and over and over, don't act like a railroad. These are some of our markets. I won't go through them all, but when you consider a railroad that started only with grain, we've expanded quite a bit, and next year we'll be adding even more commodities to our mix. When we first took over the line in 1994, a typical month was about 230 cars of grain loaded. We have elevators now that will do, one elevator will do 250 or 300, and so we do nearly 2,000 carloads of grain per month now. Interesting point is, at the bottom of our line, we kind of look at Iowa Northern as a funnel. And there's 1 billion bushels of corn in a normal year that's growing along our line. And we'll handle about 22,000 carloads this year of corn, soybeans, oats, and now we're even moving some barley to Quaker. But if Cedar Rapids was an independent nation, it would be the 3rd largest importer of corn in the world. It would rank only behind Japan and Mexico for the level of consumption. So when you consider that they're consuming 1 million bushels a day, every month they're consuming an entire county out of the state of Iowa. The drought is certainly scary for all of us. We believe that by the end of this year it will affect us by a loss of about 6,000 carloads of corn. And it took about $4 million out of our projected revenue this year just because of the market conditions and then the market conditions that were reacting to the drought. We really don't know where this is going to go. It could be a long-lasting effect on a lot of our customers. We were a leader in the ethanol world. We developed one of the only originating ethanol terminals to consolidate ethanol. We have 2 ethanol plants that are on our line besides the consumers at Cedar Rapids. And we went from 0 cars in 2005 to about 14,000 cars a year in 2011. It's a big piece of our business. We also work on creating new business. With Union Pacific, UP serves the big John Deere tractor factory in Waterloo. And they have about 4 miles of track, and then they bring the tractors to us and we take them back to the UP, either at Cedar Rapids or Manly. And we often get into some very interesting scenarios where we had a shipload of tractors going to China, and the delays of getting them loaded, the production was very, very close. So they asked if we would team up with them and run a solid unit train instead of going 10 or 15 cars a day. So we put together about a 97-car unit train of tractors, and each one of those are worth about $250,000. And we were able to beat the deadline on the ship at Galveston by 4 days. And so we're working with UP and John Deere now to maybe put all of their rail production into, particularly the exports, into unit trains. We're very big in fertilizer. We've got several fertilizer plants on our line with quite a bit of expansion. We work as UP's agent on their fertilizer into Waterloo. I think with the drought, we were fearful that we would lose a lot of fertilizer business, but we're hearing now that it's actually going to take more. We were a leader in the wind energy business. We built one of the largest distribution centers in the United States at Manly. But of course, we're really concerned now the wind business has died off nearly completely until the determination is made on the production tax credits. And that's all in the hands of Congress, and right now it doesn't look very favorable for wind to restore much in the next year or two. That's a picture of our 25 acre, actually about 30 acres of solid wind. That's what it generally looks like from about April through October of the last 5 years at Manly. There's probably well over $1 billion worth of components in that picture. We also do a lot of transloading, and we're developing a lot of growth in this area. We do a lot of food products. We do sugar. We do vegetable oils, a lot of unique things that we're doing. And after the recession started, we found that for the first time that we'd started handling lumber. What few folks were buying lumber had to reduce the cost. And so where they used to truck it in from maybe British Columbia or a regional center, they came to us and asked if we could set up a transfer reload. And now we're doing about a car of lumber about every other day. So it's very good growth. We also do food-grade starches. We do the boxes there on the right is vegetable oil coming in for salad dressing. And there's a lot of unique things that for a short-line railroad we get very involved in. And part of this is because we have so many connections that we really serve well as that last mile for the large railroads. We also do some container work, all related to the wind components. A lot of imports of wind will have a lot of small parts and pieces that go with the turbines, and we convinced the UP to work with us that we could take care of that at Manly if they would run it by rail instead of trucking, and it was a nice little niche as long as the wind business was alive. Then, of course, we do a tremendous business with John Deere at Waterloo, and it's a lot of fun to see a trainload of tractors. It's a very beautiful train, and it has a lot of value. Interesting point, too, is that a tractor is never built unless that owner is identified. So in many cases, a farmer, say from Saskatchewan, will come and he'll turn the key on the tractor for the first startup of that tractor. And it's really fun to see how sophisticated this business has become and how much it's growing. Most of the tractors we handle are exports. So when you see a trainload of tractors, you might see different and very unique tractors. They may be going to Kazakhstan or Russia or China or Brazil or Argentina, and every one has their own specs on the design of the lights, the fenders, and a lot of the apparatus in each tractor. In 2008, we had a horrible disaster. In June, my son came in and said, "What's the worst thing that could happen?" I said, "The worst thing that could happen would be losing the UP bridge at Waterloo." And about 12 hours later, he came running into my office, and I knew exactly what had happened. We lost the UP bridge at Waterloo. We also lost our Krandic Bridge at Cedar Rapids, which is the one on the bottom left. We had about 38 miles of our track torn up or underwater, and the severing of the UP bridge at Waterloo took it's a 9-span bridge, and 5 of them were in the river. And it took 18 months through the bureaucracy, the processes with the community, the state, and the Corps of Engineers to get that bridge rebuilt. And so we had to run our railroad with a break in the middle and run it from both ends. And the Union Pacific was very gracious. They did a 250-mile detour of our corn from Manly to Cedar Rapids so we could survive through this. In total, it was costing us about $800,000 per month with the detours and the additional cost, segmented for 18 months. And we're still doing a lot of flood mitigation, and hopefully we'll never have to go through what we did, but it was a very painful experience. So there's a few new things we're doing at Iowa Northern. One thing that we've been working on is what's called a slug unit. If you look at the second unit in that consist of locomotives, you'll see it's a short, flat device. It has no motor of any kind in there. It has, no diesel engine. It's got 4 traction motors on the axle, just like a locomotive, but it takes the power from the generator of the mother unit that's attached to it. So when that mother unit and the slug go out, it has the emissions and the fuel burn of 1 locomotive, but the tractive effort of 2. And we found that for every slug that we put into service, it paid for itself in 10 months just in fuel savings alone. We also took over a line that was going to be abandoned by Union Pacific. We operate over Canadian Pacific for about 28 miles to the Forest City-Belmond Line. And Forest City, you may or may not know, is the home of Winnebago for the large RVs. It was quite an interesting experience to take over this line. There's 2 major elevators that load regularly. They had not loaded any corn for about 5 years. In the first month after taking over, we handled more traffic than had been handled on that line the prior 5 years. And so we expected that it would take us about a year to get a break even. We're break even or profitable in about 45 days of operation of the line. And so the service levels that we provide to this line now has become very attractive. There's some new industrial parks that are going to be built. We're working with Winnebago to bring inbound chassis and other material. We're also looking at containerizing outbound export RVs over time that will go up by rail instead of being driven literally to the West Coast. We've also been working for about probably 10 years now on biomass. We thought things would happen much quicker than it had, but we joined up with a couple of folks and with Iowa State University to really do a lot of research. There's a possibility that regulators will require about a 20% blend of biomass in with coal in the future. And our line just coincidentally has about 12 million tons of excess corn stover with every harvest that's currently just plowed over or just tilled in the next year. That's within 30 miles of our line. By baling this and getting it to the rail and to a processor, like a thermal gasification plant or a power plant, It would generate 75,000 carloads of business for our short line. The larger railroads are not too focused on this right now because it's generally short haul moves. We do have some other interesting future plans with industrial development. We've designated 4 areas along our line that will become major industrial parks. This first one is at Butler. It's a little blurry, and that's deliberately so you can't go out and buy some land next to us. But the Butler Park will expand about 300 acres. We're going to have a new locomotive shop, fairly major rail yard there. We have 2 new industries that are breaking ground by the end of this year, and we anticipate that we'll probably have 6 or 7 industries there over the next 5 years that will generate about 1,000 jobs. Manly is kind of our pride and joy right now. It's also my hometown. The Manly terminal operation that you saw before has a 3 million gallon tank for outbound ethanol, or perhaps crude now. We have 2 1 million gallon tanks for inbound diesel fuel or denaturants or other products. We do about 12 different chemicals through Manly now. And we've also started as fairly center of operations for outbound corn oil coming from the extraction of corn oil from the ethanol plants. If you see the UP spine line is right adjacent to our yard. We've got a very large yard that we've just completed rebuilding. And our logistics park is 162 acres that we're developing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We've got the 162 acres, and it's just about right on the Minnesota-Iowa border. We're actually about 15 miles excuse me, from the border. And we're establishing a much larger transloading facility. Next week, we've got the groundbreaking for a steel distribution center that will bring coil steel in for Iowa manufacturers and for southern Minnesota. And we'll be working on outbound moves. We're looking for a very large cold storage and freezer warehouse. There's some major players like Hormel, Tyson, Kraft Foods, Cargill that are in the area. And we're trying to create a whole campus-like setting of an origination point where mix and match loads can be sent not only for domestic purpose but for export. And then there's a substantial intermodal facility that we're planning in conjunction with a number of our partners, including the state of Iowa. This is a picture of our coiled steel operation, or what it will look like when we start. That should be in full operation by April or May. The other interesting thing about North Iowa is Iowa is the largest producer of eggs in the United States. We've got about, I recall now, about 63 million laying hens in North Iowa, and each one of them lays an egg every 26 hours. There's 400 trucks a week that leave North Iowa for California alone. And so what we're working on is to develop a mechanism to safely load those into refrigerator cars or trailers and run them by rail into these large markets. The intermodal base case is very interesting for the state of Iowa. Iowa ships out about 3 loads for every 1 inbound load. So what happens is a company that wants to ship intermodally out of Iowa, say in Des Moines or North Iowa, has to order a container from Chicago. They have to pay for the empty container to come out. They put a loaded container on that truck and ship it back. So they start with a cost of about $1,200 for that box to get to an intermodal train that's going to go through Iowa on its way to California. And so what we did is we took a regional approach to it. And we analyzed what does the state of Minnesota do since we're so close to the border. And if you draw a circle with, say, a 150-mile radius of Manly, Iowa, the ratio of inbound to outbound boxes comes out 7.2 to 7.6. And it's one of the few locations that we believe will have almost perfect balance on the containers. We're working with a Chinese company now that is committing to 1 million metric tons of distiller grains, and they've been working with the Chinese shipping companies to identify inbound loads for Iowa and Minnesota that can be developed into this new efficient facility in North Iowa. Also working very closely with the Department of Economic Development, the Governor's Office, and now we'll be working very closely with the state legislature to see if we can make a public-private partnership out of this and develop a world-class facility. This is the map indicating kind of where we're at. It brings Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, almost all the way to Sioux Falls, goes into Wisconsin, but primarily the southern third of Minnesota is within that radius. We're on three major interstate highways, so the availability of good truck moves in and out of Manly is there now. All the roadways were increased in structure over the last 5 years by the state of Iowa and Worth County to handle the very heavy wind components and the blades and the type of commodities that we already have. So the infrastructure is there. This is kind of a sketch of what our facility will look like. On the left side is the little pink box is the new steel distribution center. Then we're going to have new transload tracks. We'll have a bypass that will connect the loop tracks, then a cold storage freezer warehouse, and then a fairly substantial intermodal facility and container yard. The loop track that goes around here will ultimately be double tracked, so it'll have the capacity of handling 2 full container trains inbound and outbound simultaneously without getting in each other's way. We do a lot of business right now with Union Pacific, and that's growing actually as we speak. We're up to about 20,000 revenue cars annually with UP. We're doing about 6,000 with Canadian Pacific, and that is expected to grow. We do quite a bit with Canadian National, but our goal is to go from 20,000 carloads in about 1998 to hit 105,000 carloads by 2014. And we're on the curve right now. We've broken through the 60,000 mark, and some of the projects that we have over the next 15 months should put us well up toward 90,000 revenue units, not counting the intermodal. Getting into the financial side of things, that graph kind of shows where we've been in revenues and operating expense and of course our earnings, and you can see the hit that we took with the flood. But since then, and despite the recession, we've been able to continue with some fairly sizable growth and cost reduction. We try to encourage all of our engineering and operating guys to realize that they have a very strong effect on the bottom line of the company. And we talk a lot about that. We show them that as we grow, we have the ability through capital spending to reduce our cost. Our unit cost has dropped dramatically over the last few years, and as a consequence of this spending, we reach a point where the capital spending can drop off and more profitability can go into the company, and then have more opportunities for development, acquisitions, and building the company. When we started, we were right about $3.5 million in revenue in 1994, and we've broken through the $30 million worth of revenue this year. In the overall scheme of things, 3 full years over 30,000, you're brought up to what's called a Class 2 railroad instead of a Class 3. And so we're kind of going from the lowest levels of the minor leagues into maybe more of a AAA club. Productivity is real important. We get down to the train crew level, have them see how many more cars we can get on that same train. What can they do to deliver this as well as possible? What impact do they have? We have conductors that will be going across the country, and they'll call the next elevator and say, look, we don't have any instructions to stop and serve you, but if there's something while we're in town that's come up, we're here for you, and we'll be there in about 15 minutes. And I don't think too many railroads have that culture. We try to create a very close correlation to the number of crew starts. We believe very strongly in high service levels. As you can see, as we've increased the number of crew starts, the traffic actually grows with the service. In our revenue per crew start, we have some fairly large goals on where to get this, but there is so much we can do. The economies of scales of railroading is so efficient that a train that's currently handled 25 cars, 3 years from now might be handling 95 cars with the same crew. You just add the locomotives and make sure that you have the track structure to allow them to get over the road. Our fuel burn per revenue car is going down, and we'll talk a little bit about how we've done that. Our goal is to cut our fuel burn from about 2008 to 2013 by half. And that's not very easy to do, but we've done a number of things. We have what's called smart starts and hot starts. If the engine detects that there's been no activity for 15 minutes, it shuts the engine down. It charges the battery. We've got a little diesel engine that'll burn maybe 2.5 gallons per hour instead of the prime mover that's going to burn 30. And so even in the wintertime, our locomotives will shut down if they're not constructive. We have a lot of attention given to the crews and how they manage the train, how they use their power, the braking, and we're able to get our fuel down. Our control stands tell the engineer how much fuel he's burning and how he can back off based on throttle position. If he doesn't need to have that throttle in the 8th notch, backing off to number 6, and it's going to save us 80 gallons per hour. So it's a very sophisticated approach that we're trying to take. We have GPS on every locomotive. We can tell how much fuel is in the tank at any given time. We know their throttle position, what they're doing with their brakes. It's kind of spooky. The guys, we'll call them up and say, why did you stop there at milepost 190? And say, how did you know? And it's very interesting to see now the way the crews have taken this as a tool for themselves. We talked about slugs, and this train that you see there used to take 7 locomotives to handle about 90 cars into ADM at Cedar Rapids. We do it now with 4 locomotives and 2 slugs. And so, as I mentioned, the payback for a slug is 10 months just in fuel savings. And when we have a 24/7 operation, we look for those trains that have a lot of stopping and going and acceleration penalties and put the slugs on those, and it has a dramatic impact on the fuel savings. Our capital spending is primarily tied to safety and to efficiency, and over roughly an 8-year period, we will have spent $100 million on the line by 2015. To give you an idea what that means, and over the last 3 or 4 years, we've spent $59,000 per mile. The Union Pacific is the largest spender of capital in the entire industry, and they spend less per mile than the Iowa Northern. Critical to our operations at Manly in particular is a new yard. We've got tracks 7 through 12 done. 2 and 6 are just being finalized now. We've added lights, new crossovers. There's a new car repair facility. And so as soon as we started building this, we gave Union Pacific our design, asked them if there was anything that they would see that should change. And then we came back to them as it was being built and said, if this was a Union Pacific facility, what would you do with it? And now we're meeting with UP on a regular basis to say, gee, we can save $5 million at Mankato, Minnesota if we bring traffic into Manly. You switch it for us, you hand it back to us in a finished form. A lot of partnerships now that we're doing with UP and the other railroads. It's a lot of fun because now even their industrial development people will get potential new customer, and the UP will say, call Iowa Northern first. They know that we'll take care of the business, we'll be like an agent of UP in that instance, and we can grow together and have a national network to support it. The picture there is a continuous welded rail train. Welded rail is the greatest thing that's ever happened in the rail industry as far as I'm concerned, and some of you may have an interest in welded rail, but it has a huge impact on our ability to get over the railroad. It brings us up to a Federal Railroad FRA standard that's good for 40 miles an hour. We find our sweet spot for fuel consumption at 25, but we've just about eliminated any sort of main track derailment on our line. We've also gone on kind of a unique situation where every yard track or every non-main line tie that we install is steel ties. It costs us about $20 a time more to install it, but when you install a wood tie in a place like North Iowa, you can count on maybe 35 to 45 year life on that tie. After Norfolk Southern did their studies on steel ties, I'm convinced that my great-great-grandchildren will never have to replace any of these ties. They're probably good for a couple of 100 years. They also appreciate in value. So if I ever need to borrow money on the collateral of the railroad, we've got a steel infrastructure to support it. Eliminating slow orders, it's so key to have good rail. There's nothing more important than track. You can have anything else in the world, but if it's not track. So just in the last few months, we've done a tremendous job in reducing. We're down from 46% of our railroad to 32% is now at 10 mile an hour or slower for some other reason. And we've done that in 18 months. I asked my operating planning guy to help me quantify what's the true ROI on welded rail. And I went to all my counterparts at Class 1s and the other short lines and said, how do you justify welded rail? And I've never found anybody that can give us the answer, the justification. So maybe I could challenge some of you folks to help us get to this answer. But we found with our GPS that our derailments per mile were eliminated, literally, on the main track. The only derailments we have now are generally on someone else's railroad with our trains operating, thank goodness. But with the GPS data that's available, we found some very interesting things. We had a 67% increase in our track speed. We saved 4.21 gallons per mile. And so at $3.34 a gallon, just the welded rail alone is cutting almost $500,000 off of our fuel bill. And that's where I get my goal of, with these additional opportunities, we need to be able to justify this fairly large capital spending. We've spent $12.75 million since 2008 on welded rail, and I think we'll find that it's absolutely the best investment we ever could have made. We still have to quantify our crew start savings, our track capacity increases, the utilization of our rolling stock and our locomotives, but it's a process now that's showing us that we've been going in the right direction. We're also working, we're pretending that we're the big guys in a lot of ways. Our track guys have insisted, wherever possible, that they do the work themselves. In new track construction, everything, the only two things we don't do on the Iowa Northern right now is replace a bridge or lay welded rail. If you see that bridge there, that was a victim of the floods. And we had a contractor come in, the railroad was out of service for about 24 hours to replace that bridge. And then the other two pictures are building new leads at Manley Yard. We also have taken on some mammoth projects replacing bridges with culverts. And we're doing all of this in-house. I don't think UP even does stuff like this in-house anymore. It's generally a third-party contractor. And then with our capacity spending, we've added new bridges, a lot of siding capacity. We have to be ahead of the curve. When you get new industries online, they expect that rail capacity will be in place. So oftentimes what we do is we'll have a new industry come in and we'll say, look, we don't know if you're going to ship by rail or not, so you put the money up for the material, we'll build the track, and then we'll pay you back on a per car basis. Creates a really good partnership with that customer, and it's paid off very well for all of us. But it's very interesting to see that our 30-some engineering employees probably build more track than any group of employees anywhere in North America. And I would put any of our guys up against some of the major track builders on efficiency and quality of work. This is a table that just brings down the bottom line with derailment cost. If you look at the last column, there were years that almost 10% of our revenue went to derailments and incidents. In 2011, that was less than 1%, and we want to keep it that way and keep diminishing that cost to the company. We've expanded our shop capacity. We have 26 locomotives. All of the work is done in-house unless there's a major overhaul. And in that instance, we'll generally take that diesel engine out, send it out to a contractor, and have that locomotive rebuilt, or that engine. We have 26 locomotives right now. We've gotten to be so efficient in some of our traffic that we've actually got about 5 locomotives stored. So we do have the capacity for a lot of growth. And then with the expansion, I'm hoping to get 4 more slug units this year, increase our savings and our ability to handle more tonnage with the same fleet. And we're continually rehabbing our older locomotives. The 461 not only was set up to be a mother for a slug, but it also has the generator to power the Hawkeye Express. We try to provide leadership through our people. There's a tremendous momentum in logistics right now, and nothing stays the same. The railroad used to be the same railroad year in, year out. And we find about every quarter now we have to make major adjustments on the marketplace, the connections we work with, the needs of our customers, and what can we always do to know what that customer needs, and then to decide which one of our connections has the strength to work with us. And by doing this, we put the authority in the field. There's shift workers that make decisions night and day that most railroad shoreline presidents would expect to make, and we're very proud of our people to be able to take that risk and to do the right thing. We're trying, as I say, to constantly redefine. We were very big in ethanol. Nobody knows what's going to happen to ethanol now. So the ethanol infrastructure is there. We have the tanks, we've got the tank cars, we've got the service, the sidings. So maybe that becomes crude oil, or maybe it becomes, who knows what's next. Maybe it's jet fuel A made out of biofuels. But we're going to be there, and we'll have the ability to absorb this new traffic well before it comes onto the marketplace. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight the Hawkeye Express. We handle 5,000 football fans into the stadium every home game day. That's 30,000 fans on a 7-game schedule. We're really looking forward to the Cornhuskers coming to see us on November 23rd. We invite you to come and find us at Coralville and ride the Hawkeye Express. And I hope you'll come over and introduce yourself. Thank you very much. There's not. We've had Amtrak special trains operate over Iowa Northern with private cars and this sort of thing. And we have had some other special passenger trains, but we're not in any future routes for Amtrak. But that doesn't mean that a shortcut to Minneapolis might someday be in the future. And we'd certainly be ready for it.
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your expansion plan. How do you decide when to expand and how, and what are your limitations within your area of operations now?
Well, we're an overnight sensation after 43 years, so we've learned through a lot of pain in my short line life that some of the business models for short lines just don't work for us. So we've got one rule, and that is we'll take any line that we can get as long as it's contiguous to us, either by trackage rights or connecting directly. And part of the thing we do is we try to be very supportive for the Class 1 efforts to show them that we have an ability to serve customers that they will never have. And as a consequence, if they get to a point where they identify a line as marginal, I think most of them realize now that the Iowa Northern would be a great candidate to either lease the line, buy it, or partner with that Class 1. So it wouldn't surprise me in, say, 5 years if we pick up another 500 miles of track. But otherwise, all of our growth is organic. It's internal, so we have a question we ask ourselves every month. Is there any piece of track on our railroad that's not making money? And if we could make more money by building another track, what's our return on investment? How soon can we get it in? Whenever we lay welded rail, it's usually at 7.5 miles at a time, so that gives us some tremendous cascade rail for the next industrial project. And that's really saved a lot of our customers a lot of cash to get that new industrial track built with a fairly high quality rail.
Two questions online, one from the University of Iowa. When hiring people, what type of education are you seeking?
Well, it depends. Most of our field people are high school graduates. We've got some conductors that are degreed. We're at a juncture now where we have professional engineering staff, and that will have to grow. We're really looking for people who have the appetite to work for a railroad. I mean, I think the railroad industry is probably the most exciting place for a young person to ever want to consider. But we still have a culture that's very materialistic, where You need to be out there in the middle of the night or on that weekend or in that snowstorm or dig out a train that's stuck in the snow or watching for that flood. There's a lot of people that come into it. We give them very thorough training, and we wash out about 60% of our new people within the first 6 months. They just decide that it's not for them. On the other hand, we get people that find out it's in their blood, and they're the best damn employees we could ever find. They're great.
And we have another question from Christy Jameson. How has your growth in capacity been aided, or has your growth in capacity been aided by any state-administered grant or loan programs?
Yes, very much. Since the inception, the original mortgage of the Iowa Northern was with the IRFA program, the Iowa Railway Finance Authority, which is the only reason that some of these lines were able to exist, because they had low-cost funding. We did a remortgage to pay for our very extensive initial welded rail program, and we got a $25.5 million loan through the Federal Railroad Administration at about 3 7/8% interest for 30 years. That is now even better. It's a 35-year term at probably about 1%. And so with our flood, we not only had help from our connecting railroads, particularly Union Pacific, but we also had literally an act of Congress to help us raise the money that it took to restore that bridge. And there's been other grants on our development of industrial facilities that the state is involved in very heavily with us.
I have another question from the Red Knight. Could you give us a brief overview of what spurred your interest in railroads to begin with, or how you got started? And there's so many different options in the transportation industry. Why railroad?
Well, I'm kind of an old guy. I'm going to turn 60 next week, and I was raised in a railroad family. My dad was a locomotive engineer running passenger freight trains between Des Moines and Manly and Cedar Rapids and to Minneapolis. So I was raised on trains. I got the opportunity to spend a lot of time along the railroad. I was the youngest. I started when I was 15 in 1968 as a student telegrapher. Worked as a track laborer when I was 16, and I was the youngest train dispatcher in the United States at the age of 18. Started working in Des Moines, and then I decided I better get my act together and get an education. So I ended up with a double major in economics and business while I was going to school. And it's probably a better way for me, because I was just going to railroad. And then once I got the opportunity, I thought, now what? What will I do? And I realized that without the education, I was going to be very limited in how far I could progress. After about 15 years working in management for the large railroads, I realized I was unemployable. And I had to get out on my own. Started a consulting firm with the idea of getting into short lines. And coincidentally, the first short line opportunity was where my dad started in 1944 in northern Iowa. So I'm back.
Any more questions on the line or in the audience?
I have two questions actually. The first is, where do you see the railroad industry in, say, 50 years from now, with advancements in technology, for example? And my second question is, with the upcoming elections, with two presidents that have pretty different and energy policies, seemingly, how do you feel like that might affect your industry in the next 4 years?
Those are good questions. 50 years from now, I know I'm going to be kind of crabby, but I'm very excited. When you look at an industry, Union Pacific celebrating their 150th anniversary this year, and you look how far we've come in the railroad industry, but it's still a steel rail on a steel wheel. And so the technology of the principle of railroading is pretty much the same, where track is everything, and everything else in between is the technology that's made us so efficient, so much beyond anything that I ever imagined when I first started on the railroad. I think my sons and my grandkids are going to have a tremendous opportunity to go to the next generation. When I started, we're loading grain in 40-foot grain boxes. Now, we're 286,000 pound capacity grain cars, and I would imagine the next few years there'll be about 318,000 pounds. When you can keep adding that productivity on a per car basis, when you look at the gains we've made just through work rules with labor, where Union Pacific can run from Council Bluffs to Cheyenne with 2 crews and at 70 miles an hour, and the ability that we have as an industry. And then you look at the very serious situation with what's happening with truck drivers. Where will those drivers come from? So the relationships that we're generating now are partnering with truckers. And that's an unlimited opportunity as far as I'm concerned. Capacity has to be there. Very interesting point is that through this recession, the railroads are just one of the few industries that have spent more money on capacity and capital spending through the recession than they ever did before. So they're coming out of a recession in the next year or two, hopefully, with incredible capacity. I think on your question on the presidential election, it's a little frustrating because I think both sides understand railroading. Both sides understand transportation. Both sides understand the critical part that we play to the economy. The one area that really frightens me is the regulatory environment that the Obama side has created. I'm on an advisory committee at the Surface Transportation Board on energy. And 7 years ago, or 5 years ago, when we started this group, the utility companies were at odds with the railroads constantly on service and rates and efficiency and productivity. But now we're 300 million tons a year less coal in our industry than we handled 2 years ago. And it'll keep growing. And until we solve that issue of using coal in a positive way and creating a partnership on how we use these commodities, I think it's going to be very, very serious for us as an economy with what this will do to the price of energy. That's about as far as I better go politically, I guess.
Well, first off, Dan, thanks for a great talk. I did have one question. I appreciate the multimodal aspect of some of the things you're talking about. I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that, the challenges in doing multimodal, having to work with the different railways and the state DOT and those things. Because it clearly is a future in our industry, and I would appreciate your insight on that.
It is. As I mentioned, we have a very close relationship with our connecting railroads. With the big railroad system, you've got a lot of politics involved. You've got changes in managers, changes in dynamics of personalities. And sometimes you're on the right side and sometimes you're on the wrong side. What we've tried to do is to always go to our connecting railroads and be very honest with them. We say we're an independent company. We're here for the benefit of the customer first. But we'd like you to be aggressive with us to capture more business. And we think we can show you how to do more yourself. For example, when the wind industry came out, we had just completed Manly Terminal with the ethanol facility. I got a call from a friend of mine at Union Pacific in Omaha, and he said, hey, we need to have distribution centers in 5 locations on Union Pacific, and Manly, Iowa is one of them. Will you take the last mile for us? And ultimately, we partnered up with UP and created the largest distribution facility, literally in North America. We do this a lot now. There's probably not at least 3 days a week, someone at one of the Class 1 railroads will call and say, what do you think of this? Is there something you can do for us to make this better? And that relationship has really been fun. The state of Iowa, as I mentioned, had the mortgage on the property when we first came back to Iowa. And had it not been for the state of Iowa and assistance through the flooding and a lot of help and facilitating the relationship, none of these railroads, other than just the core main lines, would be there today. I mean, just look at what Nebraska has lost in the last few years. They lost most of the Rock Island. They lost most of the CNW. And in fact, I was involved in a study of what we call the cowboy line from Norfolk to Chadron, and worked very hard to try to save that line, and it just couldn't get through appropriations quick enough, so the line was abandoned. But I think we'll regret that as an industry and for the state of Nebraska for generations. And so I'm not sure if I answered the question exactly the way it was asked, but the relationships that we have, even with our communities, are incredible. I'll get called to a city council meeting and they'll say, you have 7 crossings in town, when are you going to fix them? And I'll say, well, that's 349th on our list. But I'll tell you what, if you restore that crossing with us and let us close a couple of these unused crossings, we'll put it at the top of our list. And it's been a great relationship with the counties, the communities. And now after probably 10 years, we've got 90% of our almost 400 crossings totally rebuilt now.
So 2 more questions from the online audience. University of Iowa asks, safety, car versus train conflicts at railroad crossings is a concern. Do you have any thoughts on how it can be improved?
Well, in my career, it's improved a lot. Folks like you that have that research capability, Operation Lifesaver, I think, has been very good, particularly when you start teaching young children in elementary school of the dangers. There's probably nothing scarier than to be on a train and see a car on that crossing, or a school bus, or a gas truck, or something like that. And I've been on trains with some near misses that I'll never forget. And it's the most powerful thing to frighten you, to see that from the locomotive and know how helpless you are. I was on a rail diesel car in Canada quite a few years ago, and we were doing 90 miles an hour, and a gravel truck just cleared, and I was standing in the cab with the engineer, and there wouldn't have been one survivor if we would have hit that gravel truck. Out of about 95 passengers and me and the crew and myself, none of us would have survived that. And so I can't answer your question on how it can continue improving, other than it's an area that has been getting good federal and state funding. It's probably one of the most important things we can do. And the work that I've seen here just in my brief visit indicates that you guys are really in the right direction, and it's really tweaking now to get those nuances fixed on that relationship between a busy road with traffic lights and double track main lines and that. But it's very frightening. But we also have a lot of technology now. All the Class 1s have cameras, so you can at least reenact what occurred and try to prevent it from happening again. But I wish there was an easy answer for that to eliminate them completely.
One last question is, what is the possibility of having fully automated trains when they are operated remotely from the University of Iowa?
Well, go Hawks. I hope that never happens. I would guess that if you can run an airplane from over Afghanistan from North Dakota, I guess that the technology is probably there to run a train. I don't even like remote control locomotives. We're down to 2-man crews. We've got 4 eyes that are diligent to look out for things, not only the safety of themselves, but the safety of the public and other folks. I have no doubt that the technology will get us there, but I hope that they never practice it on a total basis.
That concludes our questions. Mr. Speaker, I turn to the floor.
Thank you.